Hello everyone, welcome to September Magic's YouTube channel. Today's video is a tutorial to make a very useful tool that is going to cut your bullet journaling time into half. Usually what happens is you look at all these inspirations that you see on social media and you are all pumped up to create your own layouts, and you sit down to journal, but what happens is you get stuck counting these rows and columns and you lose your mojo to do your artistic work or your more interesting work basically. So I definitely recommend you make your own personal grid spacing ruler, and then you will never have to count those squares again ever, believe me. So let's get started and see how this actually works. When making your monthlies or your weeklies or your dailies, it's very easy. If you have to count two squares and draw a line, it's pretty easy when you have to just make little squares or rectangles or columns of 2 square width or 3 square width. But when you have to make like 4 columns or 3 columns, it gets a little tricky there, because then you have to count each and every square, and it can be very time consuming and it can be a buzzkill, to be honest, because every journal has different measurements, and the spacing of between each square is different. So I would suggest that you make your own grid ruler. This is my journal. This is my A5 Leuchtturm 1917, and this is just a paper that I'm using to show you the calculation. It's not very complicated math. It's very simple. You can just do it in a few steps using a calculator, or if you're good at math or good at multiplying it and dividing, it's pretty easy. So to divide your rows and columns, all you have to do is count the number of squares you have this way as well as this way. So it's going to be different for every journal. For my journal, it's 26 squares this way and 37 squares this way. So all I have to do is divide that number, which is the total number of squares, by the required number of columns or rows. If you are making columns, then you will consider the total number of squares this way, but if you're making rows, then you will consider the total number of squares this way. I'm going to show you how this works practically. So first we will divide this whole page into 2 equal columns. So to do that, what I'm going to do is put the total number of squares. So because it's column, we will consider these squares, which is 26, and that is going to be divided by 2 columns, 2 number of columns. So that's going to give you 13. Now so all we have to do is we have to count 13. So basically this is going to be the center of your page. So this is basically half of your page. Okay, this is how you divide your page into half. Now what I'm going to do is show you how to divide this page into 2 equal sized rows. Now for that I will be dividing 37. So for rows, what I'm going to do is divide 37 by 2, because that's the required number of columns. So that's going to give me that's going to give me 18 point something. So what we are going to do is we're going to discard the numbers after the decimal point and just consider the number before the decimal point, which is 18. So what this means is that even after counting 18, or even after dividing the page into 18 square spanning rows, it's going to give you 1 extra square. how did I arrive at that conclusion? Basically, what you do is multiply this 18 by 2, which is going to give you 36, which is 1 less than 37, which means it's going to give you 1 extra space. The other way of doing it is drawing a line at 18.5 or 18 point something, which is going to make it very tricky. So this is a much neater and cleaner and easier way of doing things. Now I'm going to count 18 and then I'm going to draw a line. So now if you see, you have 18 squares here and 19 squares here, which is that 1 extra space. So if I want to make two rows, what I'll just do is I'll just draw a line here and give that and shift that extra space over here. All right, now let's see how to divide the page into 4 columns, into quarters. So 4 columns would be 26, which is the total number of squares here, divided by 4, which is going to give me 6 point something. So which is 6 point something, and if you multiply 4 and 6, you will get 24, which is 2 squares short than 26. So basically you will have 2 extra spaces here. What now, to make the grid, all I have to do is count 6. That's the answer that we have got. So the blue line that I've, maybe you can't tell the difference between black and blue, but I can see it very clearly here. So this blue line is for the quarter, the black is for halves. Now I'm going to do the same for rows. So here I have 37 divided by 4, because that's the number of rows that I want. I will get 9. So which means 9 multiplied by 4 is 36, which will give me 1 extra space again. The next thing I'm going to show you is divide your page into 3 columns. So basically it's, again, by now you must know, 26 divided by 3 is 8 point something. So you will get 2 extra spaces. It's good to know how many extra spaces you will have so that you can divide it when you're making your layout and you don't have to count it every now and then. So I would definitely suggest you writing down what extra spaces you'll be getting. All you have to do is multiply these 2 numbers, and then the answer that you get, you subtract it from this number. So that's that. So you get 2 extra spaces when you're making 3 columns basically. Now I'm going to do the same with my rows. So 37 divided by 3 is going to give me 12 point something, which is going to give me 1 extra space. All right, so I'm going to do the same again. Now that this is done, you can make more lines if you want, to see how many squares will you need to divide your page into, say, 5 columns or 6 columns. I will show you till 7, but I'm going to speed it up a little because now you know the method. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to write down the calculation quickly over here, and I'm going to simultaneously draw lines here. Okay, so let's do that. So now I have a grid to divide my page into a minimum of 2 columns and 2 rows and a maximum of 7 columns and 7 rows. Now ideally this should be done on the last page of your journal because this is something that you'll have to tear out of your journal. So for me these are perforated pages, so I can easily take it out. If your pages are not perforated, you can definitely cut it out, but remember, you don't cut out the dots, you just cut out the blank space around it. Now that we have this, all I'm going to do is I'm going to make a framework. I'm going to leave just 2 more squares after the line that we have for half the page. So this is just so that I can write things around it. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this out. So now you have the grid page and your calculation. So what I'm going to quickly do is I'm going to write down which line stands for what. So basically this is my half line, the line that divides my rows and columns into half. So I'm going to just write half over here. The blue one is the line that divides my page into quarters. The purple line divides the page into thirds. So I'm going to just write thirds over here. This blue dotted line divides my page into 5 columns, and here it divides into 5 rows. The purple one divides it into 6. Purple dotted one divides it into 6, and the black dotted one divides it into. I would also like to know how many extra spaces these lines leave. So basically I'm going to write down for the columns. For this I have 0 spaces. For the thirds I have 2 extra spaces here. For the quarters also I have 2 extra spaces. When I divide it into 5 I get 1 extra space. For 6 I get 2 extra spaces, and for 7 I get 5 extra spaces. Okay, now I'm going to do the same for the rows. I've trimmed the extra blank space, but I have made sure that the dots are still there. It's easier to align your grid ruler with the existing dots on your pages. So I would definitely suggest that you do that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick this onto a thick piece of paper, because this is very flimsy and I don't want it to tear, and I want to keep this for a very long time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick it onto a thick piece of paper. There you go. I have my ruler. I had an extra piece of old cardstock, so I just stuck that behind it, and now I have my ruler, my grid ruler, which I can use whenever I want. Now I will show you how this works. Say I'm going to do a weekly spread. I want 3 columns here and 4 rows over here. So all I have to do is align the dots that I have here. So if you see the dots on my ruler and the dots on my page, so now I know that this spot is going to divide my page into 3 parts, but it will also leave 2 extra spaces, which I don't want. That, you know, I divide my page into 3 columns and then there are 2 squares over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide those 2 extra spaces into 2 equal spaces on either sides of my column. So I just gave that 1 space over here and 1 space over there. So I'm going to divide this part into 3 columns. So I'm going to start my grid from here, put a line over here, then again take it over here, put a line over this dot, and I know that this is going to divide my page into 3 columns. So there you go, it's so easy. So as you can see, I have 3 equal spaced columns. I did not have to count anything. All I did was I gave one extra space. I distributed the 2 extra spaces on either sides of the page, and I divided the remaining space into 3 columns using my ruler. Like I want to leave some space on the top, I can just do that by giving, like, putting a line over here and putting a line over here. And now when I join, I have some extra space on the top, and at the bottom I have space for my weekly. So I can write my month over here. I can make a little calendar over here, and then write Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday over here. Now I'm going to divide this page into 4 columns, so which means I'm going to use the quarters, and that is also going to leave 1 extra space, which I don't want at the bottom, I want at the top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start my lines from here. So I'm going to start dividing the space after leaving the first square, and this is my quarter, so I'm going to just leave that over there, and then I'm going to make another mark here. Then again I'm going to take it from here and mark over here. So now I have 4 equal spaced rows without counting a thing. This saves so much time, and this is so handy. You can be so flexible with your layout because you don't have to spend a minute on counting the squares. You can start making your rows and columns right away without counting. So there you see, I've left 1 extra square on top because when I divide my space into 4, I have 1 extra space which I've given here. Now I have 4 equal size rows. So this is how it works basically. Now if I want a little column here, I want like a very thin column here to write my days and dates. All I have to do is decide how thin I want my lines to be. So maybe just something like this. There you go. And you have it. So by putting this very little time that I spent on making this, I'm going to save so much time every single time I sit down to journal. That brings us to the end of our video today. I would really like to hear from you guys. I want to know whether this was helpful for you or not helpful. Leave your requests, your feedback, your comments in the section below, and do subscribe to our channel if you haven't yet, because I am going to put more and more videos about bullet journaling, about painting, about art in general. So stay in touch with us. I would definitely like to hear from you, and till then, happy journaling and have a good day. Bye bye.